let's talk about this Joe Rogan clip from his podcast with Andre Ward. I thought it was good. I will say that. And again, just a good discussion that we can probably have a discussion of here. So let's hear what good old Joe Rogan and Andre Ward have to say about the difference and comparisons of how you bring along prospects in boxing versus MMA.
In that the managers dictate who the fighters fight, in that they do build their fighters up correctly. And one of the things that bothers me about MMA is I think there's some really good young fighters who get ruined because they get thrown to the wolves too quickly, and they wind up getting their confidence shattered. They get knocked out maybe when they shouldn't be. They're fighting a caliber of fighter they're not prepared for. For every one fighter like that, there's always the arguments of like a guy like John Jones, youngest ever light heavyweight champion, youngest ever UFC champion, fights a legend, Mauricio Shogun, who when he was 22 or 23, I think he was 23 years old, opens up with a flying knee, hits him in the face, beats the fuck out of him, and takes the title. For every John Jones, there's a guy who's coming up that maybe could have been a world champion, but didn't get managed correctly, and the UFC doesn't give you any options. The UFC says, hey, you want to fight Kamaru Usman? Okay, here's your fight. This is it.
It's trade-off, right? So the fans get the big fights, but in the wake of how many careers,
Yes, that's the trade-off. The fans get the big fights, but I don't think we necessarily see the highest caliber of fighter fight the highest caliber of fighter with the best case scenario at all times. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I don't think we get to see the most out of some of these guys, because I think that if they were managed, if there was a ton of different promoters around and you weren't locked in any specific sort of an organization like the UFC has, I think you could see more managers saying, hey man, you're not ready for Robbie Lawler. Hey man, you're not ready for this guy. We're going to take this fight on a regional level. We're going to build you up. We're going to get you to 15, 16-0. Then we're going to start challenging some top 10 contenders and cement your place. But this way, you'll have seen all the looks. You'll have seen a great wrestler. You've seen a great striker. You fought a Muay Thai champion. You fought a jiu-jitsu guy. You know how to handle all these different scenarios. And in MMA, that is part of the problem, is that it's not just your hands. There's so many different scenarios that you have to deal with.
Now, I know like predominantly a lot of you guys listening right now are just boxing heads. So I'm going to keep it just boxing or try to frame the discussion from a boxing perspective. Is he right that the current form of bringing along prospects in boxing is the, quote, correct form, is the best form? Or is at least a better form than MMA, the UFC, Bellator, whatever? Is that true? And I'm curious for the guys in the chat. Again, anyone wants to call in. I think largely speaking, he is right that, again, generally speaking, in the UFC, guys are pushed along far too fast at times. And then on top of that, when they reach a certain level, they never dip back below that level. So once you hit top 15 names, you kind of always fight top 15 names until you are truly irrelevant, right? Look at like BJ Penn, right? He hasn't won a fight since like I think 2012, 2011 maybe, right? When he defeated Matt Hughes. He's lost like 8 fights since then, 10 fights since then. He's fought top 10, top 15 competition from 170 all the way down to 145 since then, and lost every time. But he is not really allowed, or he doesn't really want, worse competition. I'm going to get to probably the BJ Penn situation later on with some of your topics and questions in the topics and questions post. But I agree that the current UFC model for how you bring along prospects, and even then to add to the point that the way top level guys are not given tune-ups. I know that's controversial maybe for boxing heads, and maybe that's why I'm reframing in the boxing perspective, and hopefully make some of you guys in the chat and maybe some others answer this, or at least think about it, at least put out this thought out there and have you guys think about it as well. Now, in boxing, largely speaking, I think how prospects are brought along is accepted, right? Like if you look around the industry, I think it's okay when we see guys are 10, 15-0 and then reaching world level. Even then, again, like 20-0. The only times it's really gotten out of control is when we hear like 40-0 guys or like 35-0 guys and they haven't fought anyone, right? Like that's when we start getting like, okay, what are you doing here, right? But largely speaking, and generally speaking, the go to 15-0, 20-0 path and then fight world level, top level competition, and slowly bring you up, I think is the right way. And I think we all accept that that's probably the right way to do it. Lunatic saying the pacing of fighters a fluid thing. There's no right way. Frank Morrison Torres for slow pacing. But then again, we just saw Anthony Yard, who had like a slow pace and then a huge jump up. It's weird. Daniel Dubois, who obviously is not getting a slow pacing, I would say, right? But digressing back, I think, again, generally speaking, Lunatic, because you haven't disputed this, that you really see guys go to 15 and 20-0 and then fight world level guys. That's the norm. Even if you're legit prospects coming from the amateurs, you really don't see them fight top level guys till 12-0, 13-0, like a Shakur, Teofimo Lopez. Who else could I bring up? Maybe like a Brandon Figueroa, so Gary doesn't get all mad. But again, I think we agree, generally speaking, that is the norm. And I think generally speaking, we do accept that. But is that the best way to do it? Is that the perfect average, so to speak? Because again, I agree that every pace of a fighter is different, but that's not the discussion. We're talking about averages and norms here. Like we're generalizing here for the sake of discussion. We have to. There are industry standards and practices that are out there. You know, they may not be written in word, but we know them. And again, fighters at the top level in boxing, to again add to the point that Joe Rogan and Andre Ward were talking about, we do see them fight top level guy and then have a tune-up or two, and then fight a world level guy and a tune-up or two. I think that is far more criticized than the first path, the path of the prospect, right? The path of a champion is largely more criticized in boxing. The current industry norms and standards are not accepted, I would say, generally speaking, by us. So, but, and again, to contrast it with MMA, I think our current industry norm is far better than the UFC's norm, than MMA's norm. I think MMA and UFC should get towards where we are at. Now, does that mean that the best sort of average industry norm is somewhere in the middle, where guys may be fighting two top-level guys, two guys in the top 10, top 5 rankings, and they dip low for a top 15, 20 tune-up? Is that going to be the perfect medium that we need to get to as a industry? I don't know. But, again, I think these are questions that we have, and that these are discussions that can be had, and it's just interesting. I heard this from Joe Rogan and Andre Ward. I thought, hey, I'll talk about it. I'll rant about it a little bit, and I'll put some of these thoughts out there for you guys.